Hey guys, this is here again for another album review. Today I have the Flaming Lips with The Terror. It's a bit of a late night review for me, so I apologise if I stumble over my words, or actually no, I probably won't notice if I do, so if I say something that literally does not make any sense, then that is why. Let's get into it. Flaming Lips, for this album at least, they're a psychedelic rock, noise rock. They bring in a lot of influences from the 70s and particularly the 60s, I should say, more so than the 70s, and a lot of experimentation and that sort of stuff, as I think they're known for in the past. I haven't listened to too many of their albums. I've got one or two on my computer that I've listened to a little bit of. I need to get into more of them though. I know that they're one of those bands that I see like a massive hype for, and I'm like, I think I'll be probably disappointed, so I don't listen to and miss out on something. But anyway, it starts off with Look, the Sun is Rising. And it's a great opener. It's catchy, it's noisy, it's got this really warm modulation, and it actually follows through the whole album. It's a bit of a reoccurring thing right up to the last song, which is kind of a cool thing. It never gets really old. It's never really intended to be like the main forefront or something. It's just something that's in the background, so it's not something that's just overly repetitive or annoying. It's just something that it gives the album a bit of character, I guess you could say. This song, like the rest of, or most of the other albums, vocals are quite ambient, distant. Think a little bit maybe like early Pink Floyd, maybe. Had a great melody, particularly Hark to the Past with a 60s, 70s kind of psych, prog rock kind of influences of which go through a lot of the songs in this album. I'll probably make note of the ones where they're more evident. Towards the end, I think the modulation goes on its own, and it was really quite trippy, which is cool. Adds that kind of style of psychedelia. The second track, Be Free Away, it's a little bit of a softer track, a little bit less psych based maybe, but only a very little bit. It has this great bass line, great melody, and kind of finishes off with this cool ambient version of the melody, and it's an enjoyable track overall. Time to Explain starts off with like a spacey modulation, the same modulation as I said, the one that carries throughout the whole album. The melody in this song was actually kind of similar to Grandaddy's Jed. I'm pretty sure that's the one. It just kind of mirrors the kind of hopeless kind of feeling. It's meant to be a bit of a depressing track. The lyrics kind of mirror this as well. It was, as I said, quite a bit of a depressing track, but I really enjoyed it. It was a good song. You Lust is this 13-minute long mix of everything. Starts off with this guitar melody that's obviously inspired by 60s psych rock, and it actually carries on through, I think, the most of the song. As the song develops, well, not really develops, but the guitar melody continues throughout, and other noise elements come in, and it's just very mesmerizing for quite a long part of the song. Really repetitive, but in a good way. And that kind of speeds up as it goes along a little bit, and then fades out into kind of how it started off, and finishes off with this nice warm synth melody. I really liked the synths in this album. They used them a few times, and they're really warm, really evident, like really present I should say, and they sound amazing. The Terror, has a bit of a darker melody. Has this really great synth-led sections in it, like that same synth as I was talking about before. And then the album goes a little bit. The next track I wasn't the biggest fan of, You Are Alone. It's a bit more of an experimental track. It sounds almost a little bit Animal Collective, but I don't know, it was a little bit nothing. There was nothing really there. It was a bit all over the place, but it was just at the same time, it was a bit dull, just in comparison to the rest of the album. And then Butterfly, How Long It Takes to Die. It's kind of more of the same as you get along, as you've heard in the beginning of the album. It's more psych rock song. It's probably, again, not quite as interesting as some of the stuff that they had earlier on, but it's still a good song on its own. And then the last two songs are quite similar. They both have this darker melody, kind of the same as The Terror. And yeah, they both start off in the same way. The first half of the song's quite soft and eerie, and then it kind of builds up as they go along. But I actually found both of the endings to these songs kind of a bit underwhelming. They could have really exploded, especially considering how the album finishes. That I really felt like they could have been a lot more explosive and would have been a nice finish to the album, but they were a little underwhelming. Turning Violent was probably a bit more underwhelming than Always There in Our Hearts, though considering Always There in Our Hearts was the last track, I definitely felt like when it ended it was a bit like, well, like it wasn't a bad track, but it was, I don't know, I think they were poor choices to close up with. Both of the songs though were decent songs. I'm not saying they weren't, they were just a little underwhelming towards the end of them. Also, Always There in Our Hearts, I think the modulation, I think it's the first time in this album, it's the first one that I actually took note of at least, where the modulation changes. Actually sounds a little bit like the Doctor Who theme, I won't lie, just a little bit, but yeah, it's the first time it changes. It's kind of a little bit of a generic melody, but at the same time, like, it's still an enjoyable one, and for the first time that the modulation changes. As I said, I think that's the first time. It's the first time I noticed it. Certainly, it doesn't change a lot. Yeah, it was nice to have that, especially in the last track, and it did it in a nice way. Overall, I'm going to give the album an 8 out of 10. Great psychedelic album, really did what it was intended to do. It was really quite dynamic, changed up a lot of sounds and song progressions in a way that kept the album really interesting, even to the end, for the most part, of course, except from the fact that the last 2 tracks were a little underwhelming. The 4 tracks that it finished off with were all a little bit, felt a little bit weaker in comparison to the rest of the album. Maybe the last 2 weren't so much, but they just, as I said, like for like the 50 millionth time, they finished a little underwhelming, and that was off-putting considering the album had been so good beforehand. But at the same time, it was a great album, and yeah, it's the Flaming Lips have had a lot of albums, and they're obviously still very much relevant, and I'm interested to see what they do next. Even if it is in collaboration with Keisha, it will be interesting nonetheless. So yeah, thanks for watching. I will see you guys next time with The Knife. Goodbye.